Imagine coming home after a long business trip, walking into your mansion and finding your son in the kitchen with someone you never expected. A millionaire father returns to discover his only child laughing and cooking with the new black maid he just hired. His reaction? Absolutely shocking. But what unfolds next will change everything he thought he knew about family, kindness, and what truly matters in life. This is a story that will move your heart. Richard Morrison was a man who had everything money could buy. His sprawling estate sat on 10 acres of perfectly manicured lawns. His garage housed 5 luxury cars, and his bank account had more zeros than most people could count. But despite all his wealth, Richard was a cold man. He valued efficiency over emotion, success over sentiment. When his wife passed away 3 years ago, he threw himself even deeper into his business empire, leaving his 12-year-old son, Tyler, in the care of a rotating staff of nannies and housekeepers who rarely lasted more than a few months. Richard's standards were impossibly high. He criticized every meal, complained about every wrinkle in his shirts, and fired employees for the smallest mistakes. His home had become a place of tension and fear, where staff members walked on eggshells, terrified of losing their jobs. Tyler grew up in this cold environment, watching his father treat people like they were disposable. The boy became quiet and withdrawn, spending most of his time alone in his room, rarely speaking to anyone. Richard barely noticed, too consumed with closing his next business deal. Then came Maya. She was a 24-year-old woman who had recently moved to the city, struggling to make ends meet while putting herself through nursing school. Her previous job had fallen through, and she desperately needed work to pay her tuition and support her younger siblings back home. When she saw the posting for a live-in housekeeper position at the Morrison estate, she applied immediately, despite hearing whispers from other domestic workers about how difficult Mr. Morrison was to please. Maya needed this job, and she was determined to make it work no matter how challenging. On her first day, Richard barely looked at her. He handed her a 10-page list of rules and expectations, his voice dripping with condescension. "I expect perfection," he said coldly, his eyes never meeting hers. "The last 3 housekeepers couldn't manage that. I doubt you'll be any different, but we'll see." Maya felt the sting of his dismissive tone, but held her head high. "I'll do my best, sir," she replied quietly. Richard scoffed and walked away, already convinced she would fail like all the others. He gave her 2 weeks at most. What Richard didn't know was that Maya had a gift. She wasn't just kind, she was genuinely caring in a way that touched everyone around her. On her second day, while cleaning the hallways, she heard quiet crying coming from Tyler's room. She knocked gently, and when the boy opened the door with red, swollen eyes, her heart broke. "Hey there," she said softly. "Are you okay?" Tyler was startled. None of the previous staff had ever asked him how he felt. They were too afraid of his father to get close to him, but something about Maya's warm smile made him feel safe. Over the next few days, Maya and Tyler began to form a bond. She learned that he loved dinosaurs, but had no one to share his interest with. She discovered he was struggling with math homework, but was too scared to ask for help because his father would call him stupid. She found out he missed his mother terribly and kept her photo hidden in his drawer because his father had removed all pictures of her from the house, claiming they were distractions. Maya's heart ached for this lonely, hurting child living in a mansion that felt more like a prison. Maya started spending her breaks with Tyler. She helped him with his homework, listened to his stories about dinosaurs, and most importantly, she taught him something his father never had: how to cook. Tyler was fascinated by the kitchen, a place he'd always been told was off-limits to him. Maya showed him how to measure ingredients, crack eggs, and knead dough. For the first time in years, genuine laughter echoed through the Morrison house. Tyler was transforming, becoming more confident, more joyful, more alive. Richard was away on a 2-week business trip in Europe, completely unaware of what was happening in his own home. He called once to bark orders at Maya about keeping the house spotless and making sure Tyler stayed out of trouble. He didn't ask how his son was doing or if he needed anything. It was purely transactional. Meanwhile, back at the estate, Maya had become more than just a housekeeper. She had become the mother figure Tyler desperately needed, the warm presence that had been missing from his life for so long. The entire atmosphere of the house had changed, filled with warmth and kindness. Then came the day Richard returned home early. His business deal had closed faster than expected, and he decided to surprise everyone by coming back a week ahead of schedule. He walked through the front door, expecting to find his usual silent, sterile home. Instead, he heard something that stopped him in his tracks: laughter. Real, genuine, joyful laughter coming from his kitchen. Richard's face darkened with anger. What was going on? He had specifically instructed that Tyler was never to be in the kitchen unsupervised. He stormed toward the sound, ready to fire whoever was responsible for this violation of his rules. What Richard saw when he burst through the kitchen door left him absolutely stunned. There was Tyler, his quiet, withdrawn son wearing an apron covered in flour, grinning from ear to ear as he stirred something in a mixing bowl, and beside him, guiding his hands and laughing along with him, was Maya. The kitchen was a beautiful mess, flour everywhere, dishes piled in the sink, ingredients scattered across the counter. But Tyler's face, his face was radiant with pure happiness, something Richard hadn't seen since before his wife died. For a moment, Richard couldn't speak. He just stood there frozen, watching this scene that seemed impossible in his own home. What is going on here? Richard's voice cut through the laughter like a knife. Tyler's smile vanished instantly, replaced by the familiar look of fear. Maya turned calmly, though her heart was pounding. "Mr. Morrison, welcome home. Tyler and I were just baking cookies. We wanted to surprise you." Richard's face turned red with rage. "Surprise me? You're letting my son make a mess in my kitchen? You're wasting time playing instead of doing your job. This is exactly why I can't keep decent help. You're fired. Pack your things and get out." Tyler's eyes filled with tears. "Dad, no. Please don't fire Maya. She's the only one who's ever been nice to me. She helps me with homework, she talks to me, she actually cares about me." Richard turned to his son, shocked by his outburst. Tyler never raised his voice, never challenged him. "This doesn't concern you, Tyler. Go to your room." But Tyler didn't move. Instead, he did something that stunned his father even more. He stepped in front of Maya, protecting her. "It does concern me, Dad." Tyler's voice cracked with emotion. "Ever since Mom died, you don't even look at me anymore. You treat everyone in this house like they're nothing. Maya is the first person who made me feel like I matter, like I'm not just some burden you have to deal with. She taught me how to cook. She listens to my stories. She makes me feel loved. And you want to fire her just because we were having fun? When was the last time you had fun with me, Dad? When was the last time you even asked how I was doing?" Richard felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. His son's words cut deeper than any business loss ever could. He looked at Tyler, really looked at him, and saw tears streaming down his face. He saw the pain, the loneliness, the desperate need for love that he'd been too blind to notice. Then he looked at Maya, who stood there with quiet dignity, one hand gently resting on Tyler's shoulder. She wasn't defending herself or making excuses. She was simply there for his son, even in this moment of crisis, even as she was being fired. Something inside Richard cracked. The wall he'd built around his heart, the cold shell he'd hidden behind since his wife's death, began to crumble. He sank into a kitchen chair, suddenly looking very old and very tired. "I've been terrible, haven't I?" he whispered, his voice breaking. Tyler stood there, unsure what to do. He'd never seen his father like this, vulnerable and honest. Maya gently squeezed Tyler's shoulder, silently encouraging him to give his father a chance. "Tyler, I'm so sorry," Richard said, looking at his son with tears in his eyes for the first time in years. "Your mother's death broke something in me, and instead of being there for you, instead of grieving together, I pushed you away. I threw myself into work because it was easier than feeling the pain. But in doing that, I abandoned you. I made you feel unloved in your own home. I turned this place into a cold prison instead of a warm home. And Maya," he turned to her, "you gave my son something I should have been giving him all along: kindness, attention, and love." Maya spoke softly, her voice filled with compassion. "Mr. Morrison, Tyler doesn't need a perfect father. He just needs a father who's present, who tries, who shows him he matters. It's not too late to change. Your son loves you so much. He talks about you all the time, hoping you'll notice him, hoping you'll be proud of him. You haven't lost him. He's right here waiting for you to see him." Her words were gentle but powerful, cutting through years of pain and misunderstanding. Richard stood up slowly and walked over to Tyler. For a long moment, father and son just looked at each other. Then Richard did something he hadn't done since Tyler's mother died. He pulled his son into a tight embrace, Tyler hesitated for just a second before wrapping his arms around his father, sobbing into his chest. "I miss Mom too, Dad," Tyler cried. "But I need you. I need you to be here with me." Richard held his son tighter, his own tears falling freely now. "I'm here, son. I'm here and I'm not going anywhere." "I promise." Maya quietly started to slip out of the kitchen, wanting to give them privacy. "Wait," Richard called out, releasing Tyler but keeping one arm around his shoulders. "Please don't leave. You're not fired. In fact, I owe you an enormous apology. You did something I couldn't do. You saw my son's pain and you cared for him when I was too lost in my own grief to notice. You showed him kindness in a house that had forgotten what kindness looked like. I've been a terrible employer and an even worse father, and you somehow managed to help both of us." Maya smiled gently, her eyes also glistening with tears. "I just did what anyone with a heart should do, Mr. Morrison. Tyler is an amazing kid. He's smart, kind, creative, and so full of love. He just needed someone to see that. And you're not a terrible father. You're a father who got lost in grief, but you're finding your way back. That takes courage." Richard shook his head in wonder. "How did you stay so kind after the way I treated you?" "I was dismissive, rude, and disrespectful from the moment you arrived. Most people would have quit or treated me the same way. My grandmother always told me that hurt people," Maya explained. "When someone is cruel, it usually means they're carrying pain they don't know how to handle. I saw your pain, Mr. Morrison. I saw Tyler's pain. And I just wanted to help ease it a little bit. That's all. Kindness doesn't cost anything, but it can change everything." Richard was humbled by her wisdom. Here was a young woman who had every reason to be bitter about how life had treated her. But instead, she chose compassion and understanding. From that day forward, everything changed in the Morrison household. Richard cut back on his business trips and started spending real time with Tyler. Maya became not just an employee, but a cherished member of their small family. Richard helped pay for her nursing school, insisting it was the least he could do. The three of them cooked together in the kitchen, the place where healing had begun. Laughter became a regular sound in the once silent mansion, and Tyler blossomed into a confident, joyful young man. Richard also changed how he treated everyone in his life. He became known for his fairness and respect toward his employees. He learned that true wealth isn't measured in money or possessions, but in the relationships we build and the kindness we show. Tyler grew up with two powerful examples. His father, who showed him it's never too late to change and become a better person, and Maya, who taught him that kindness is the most powerful force in the world. Years later, when Tyler graduated from college, he gave a speech thanking the two people who shaped his life. His father, who learned to open his heart again, and Maya, the kind young woman who walked into their broken home and helped put the pieces back together. Maya sat in the audience, tears streaming down her face, now a successful nurse who continued to touch lives with her compassion. Richard sat beside her, no longer the cold millionaire, but a warm father who had learned life's most valuable lesson. This story reminds us that kindness has the power to heal the deepest wounds. It shows us that it's never too late to change, to become better, to choose love over bitterness. Maya could have responded to Richard's cruelty with anger, but instead she chose compassion. And that one choice transformed two lives forever. In a world that often rewards being tough and cold, let's remember that true strength lies in being kind, especially when it's hardest to do so.